What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here again. Why? Because it's a remake. The original wasn't really good. I believe I missed a couple of things in there. This video itself, the original, was one of my favorites on the channel. I had to pull it down a year ago for obvious reasons. Also, it's just too awesome not to cover on the channel again. Mark Henry is finally booked the way he should be, a total monster. From the menacing camera angle during his entrance all the way up to the end of the match, where he'd proudly observe the dead carcass of his opponents. From out of nowhere, he emerged as a viable main eventer. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you all to the Hall of Pain. Now, before this video starts, I just want to ask, what year video you guys want me to make? I haven't made one since July. Yep, I haven't made one since July, and I feel like I owe you, you know? Those videos, they're far in between, on purpose, I should note. But yeah, like, what year do you guys want me to talk about? Because I want to do another year video, it's as simple as that. Okay, enough talk, Hall of Pain, let's get into it. At this point in time, Mark Henry was doing nothing but taking L's, sort of like the Detroit Lions in 2010. He was the babyface that smiled and lost to mid-cards, and by the looks of it, it felt like he had accomplished everything that he could have. It was like there was no chance in hell of him becoming a main eventer at this point. It was so late in his career, and shockingly, 2011 of all years proved otherwise. I mean, if you grabbed me, I certainly wouldn't have predicted, let alone thought of this. He just seemed like one of those guys that were mid-card for life. He was teaming up with guys like Evan Bourne and Yoshi Tatu for crying out loud. Like, no one could be saying, oh, I expected Mark Henry to become a main eventer. No, nobody did. Nobody did at all. The last time he was even in a singles pay-per-view match was 2008, and this was like March of 2011 at this point. So, Mark Henry, by the looks of it, was going to retire without being a world champion. But that didn't happen, of course. His run in my eyes began on the April 25th, 2011 episode of Raw, that being the draft episode. So during the night, he gets himself drafted to SmackDown. Henry was excited to be part of the blue brand once again and proclaimed himself to be world champion by the end of the year. At the end of the night, he teamed up with Christian and John Cena to face the Raw heels, and during the match, Captain Charisma was struggling with his arm, but luckily managed to tag in John Cena. He had a hell of a lot of momentum, you know, shoulder tackles, knockdown, side slam, and Henry's playing mascot, but actually ended up clotheslining Cena, turning heel in the process. Booker, of course, shouted his famous catchphrase, "What the hell?" and Christian wanted to know what's up. Henry responds by tossing him into the steps, and this basically cost Cena and Christian the match. He obviously got drafted back to Raw, which was pretty stupid. That shouldn't have happened. I was disappointed as a kid just watching, thinking to myself, oh, Cena's back on SmackDown. But yeah, they trolled us with that one, and Alex Riley, poor guy, he got his nose busted open by the looks of it with that punch. Later that week, Mark Henry in his SmackDown debut faced Rey Mysterio. He was a heel for 2 minutes, he had Coles already sucking up to him, and the match itself saw Rey try to fight an uphill battle. But he was essentially dinner for Mark Henry. He was taking his time and decimating Mr. 619, but of course he had the fighting spirit. It had been a very long time since Henry was booked like this, you know, to be a dominant guy. Near the end, Rey found some momentum and actually hit the 619, but Cody Rhodes came in and caused the DQ. He whooped his ass in the crowd before throwing the leftovers into the ring, where Henry hit the world's strongest slam. From here, Mark Henry found himself in the upper mid-card to semi-main event. You know, he was there in the big segment, occasionally main evented SmackDown. It was like 2007 all over again. The heel turn really benefited him because he was more aggressive and more in tune with his old side. But one night in particular, and this wasn't even televised, Mark Henry was set to face Sin Cara. Problem was, Sin Cara wasn't even gonna come out because it was a rib from the boss himself. Henry waited 20 minutes standing in the middle of the ring waiting for somebody who wasn't even coming. During his Broken Skull Sessions interview with Stone Cold Steve Austin, Henry discussed the incident that almost led to him quitting. I jump through the ropes, I come to the back, and it's a ghost town. Nobody's there, and I just start destroying it, tearing down, pulling the lights down, and punching the walls. Just Darth Vader. I want everything to melt, and I go down the hallways, and I kick Vince's door open, and he's gone. Started calling Vince, man, I quit. This is the last time. Nobody ribs me. I'm a grown man. Vince calls, man, why'd you get so bent out of shape about that? We just playing around. I was like, man, I don't deserve that. I love this business and I respect you, and I feel like I opened myself up for you to disrespect me. Obviously, you don't respect me, and you damn sure don't fear me, so we don't need to talk no more. He was like, listen, I'm sorry. He was really remorseful and sorry. Vince said, okay, but can I show you something? He showed the footage of me in the ring angry and me coming to the back, and the camera cuts off. He's like, that's the most visibly angry he's been on screen in years. He said, if you could do that in the ring, we're going to make a lot of money, says Henry. Okay, here we go. On the June 17, 2011 episode of SmackDown, an emotional Big Show came out to talk about Alberto Del Rio. Apparently, I'd ran over Big Show a month ago. I don't know why that happened. And add to that, he was remorseless. The Giant was ready to do something bad to the Mexican aristocrat, but then Teddy Long came out and informed Big Show that he won't lay a finger on Alberto Del Rio if he shows up tonight. But since Big Show's angry and all that, he brought out his opponent for tonight, that being Mark Henry. Right before the match was about to begin, Big Show was crying. He was very tearful and didn't want to wrestle. And he ended up delivering a cheap shot and went all all in. Henry couldn't get in a single punch, let alone push in, and then I'm getting KO'd. The world's strongest man was unresponsive down on the mat and was stretchered out of there. This would only be fuel to the fire because at Capital Punishment, Mark Henry interfered in Big Show's match with Del Rio and slammed him through the announce table. It was completely deranged, but hey, I don't need to say it, you could see it for yourself. The next night, Henry addressed his actions from last night, saying that this is what you see when the world's strongest man meets the world's largest athlete. Someone gets punished. He said that when Big Show walks the earth, it shakes, but when he walks the earth, the fans shake, and in his eyes, bigger isn't better, and when you deal with the world's strongest man, somebody's gonna get their ass kicked. Also, what is brand split? As for his opponent, Kane, he was set to face him in an arm wrestling match. Both men jolted for power. They traded the advantage back and forth. But when it was looking like Henry's losing it, he ruined everything. Bell rings. Highly doubt he gives a damn, but Kane had some fight in him. Unfortunately, though, he didn't realize that he was facing the most unstoppable guy in the entire company. Henry was in rarefied air, the likes we hadn't seen. And yes, he did send Kane through the announce table. Damn, was she shook. "You suck" chant from the crowd as the world's strongest man walked away. Now, Henry, in my eyes, he was worried about his career. He was this close to retiring by the looks of it, and so he wanted to inflict damage like he never did before. He was gonna go all out because who knows, this might be it. Later that week, Big Show finally addressed the events of Capital Punishment and Mark Henry. He said that Mark was in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was frustrating, he told him not to get into the ring, and regardless of Henry, it could have happened to anyone. Literally 2 seconds later, Henry tackled him and shouted that bigger isn't better, better is better. At the end of the night, the world's strongest man scored a huge victory that gave Christian another title shot, and on Raw Roulette once again, Henry showed what he's made of. During the steel cage match between Del Rio and Big Show, Mark Henry lurked around the cage lying in wait for the Big Show. He lost patience and ended up removing the door once again, and he brought that door in and whacked Big Show with it. Del Rio ended up winning, and Henry sent Big Show right out of the cage. On SmackDown that week, he got the chance to face the Viper Randy Orton in a non-title match, and during this match, Big Show's music played, and Henry didn't budge. He was ready for a fight, but the problem with this was the fact that Big Show was nowhere to be found, and once Mark turned around, boom, RKO. Orton ends up winning by countout, and Henry felt a bit embarrassed. First of all, he wasn't going to challenge for the title due to this, and second, he ran up to the technical guys to get to the bottom of this. The guy was just about to piss his pants. Henry destroyed the equipment and grabbed the guy, wanted to know what this is all about, and it was an interrogation basically. Why did you play the music? You find it funny? Huh? Total destruction, but he did have a change of heart and let the man leave. Psych. He's like, "Where do you think you're going?" He drags him back, and he proceeded to toss him into the darkness. Fans boo, and Henry once again looks dominant. This is the 100th time I've said it in this video. Matt Striker tried to get to the bottom of this, and he revealed that Henry was facing a bunch of lawsuits, potentially criminal charges for his actions. He's making it seem like Henry's got a terrible life, and as for the King match, things did look dire for Henry, but he got things in check and forced a W from out of nowhere. Despite the victory, Henry wasn't too fond of the commentary team bad-mouthing it. On the final SmackDown before Money in the Bank, both Big Show and Mark Henry went face-to-face. Unfortunately for themselves, they weren't allowed to get involved in any physical altercation, and Henry claimed that the reason why he's standing on the ramp is because he wants to hold his temper. He told Big Show that this Sunday, he's going to be in hell and he's responsible for what happens, and funny enough, Henry was right. Big Show was the one who started things. He admitted that the attack he made last month did change Mark, and it was essentially a wake-up call for Henry. He thought it was a good thing for him, but Big Show told him not to direct that fire towards him. Like, I lit this fire, I can put it out. Henry responded asking if big is better, and he offered his rebuttal stating stronger is better, meaner is better, and best of all, oh my god, I've lost track, better is better. Henry reminded Big Show that he has no idea what he's capable of, and he lost his temper. He was ready for a fight, and so was Mark, but it never happened then and there. Now, the match on Money in the Bank essentially showed that Mark Henry has finally realized his potential. He directed all the anger and aggression towards his opponent, and it showed that Henry had enough of being complacent, enough of playing second fiddle to all the giants in the company, enough of those stupid storylines, and like a shark, Henry smelled blood and went after Big Show's left knee. But it wasn't like the match was a foregone conclusion. Big Show actually kicked out of the world's strongest slam, so he hit another, but he knew that he was going to kick out, so he hit 2 splashes to earn the victory. Despite the win, Henry wasn't satisfied, and he brought in a chair and wrapped it around Big Show's leg before climbing up to the second rope and snapping that leg in half. Things were so bad for the Big Show that he had to be loaded on a cart, and he disappeared following Money in the Bank. However, I gotta mention this. Big Show wasn't the only one who was going to be on the shelf, because Friday night saw Henry proclaim what he did to the Big Show as only the beginning. He felt pleasure, power, strength, and invincibility from the chaos he caused. At the end of the night, Mark Henry decided to make his presence felt again after Kane's street fight with Randy Orton. He was craving yet another beat down, and with Kane's leg already a bit hurt, it was a formality. So at this point in time, it was clear that he was going to get a big push of sorts that just might possibly eclipse his previous ones. Following week, it turned out there was a shortage of opponents. Things were so bad that Zack Ryder had to convince this jobber to face Henry. He was easily demolished, flat out destroyed, and it was cruise control for Henry. As for the commentary team, those guys were on the verge of pissing themselves, but luckily for the jobber, Teddy Long came to the rescue. He told Mark that nobody really wants to face him, added that there's a pending lawsuit. Things were very bad for Henry when Sheamus interrupted. He was mad enough to come down to the ring and ask for a fight, and this turned him to a babyface. He told a little Irish story comparing it to Mark Henry, some sort of arrogant big guy that got knocked down or whatever. The crowd got behind him because he was brave enough to run down there, and then he proceeded to slap Henry and fool him. Chair's in his hand, and Henry's ready for a fight. So thus begins the Sheamus-Mark Henry feud. He introduced another wrestler into the Hall of Pain, that being Vladimir Kozlov. Mark made him look like a joke and took him out easily, dismantled him, just like the Big Show and Kane. Once Sheamus ran down there, the damage was done, and again, Mark's like, put the chair down. I want to fight you. I should know this ended up being Kozlov's final appearance. As for Sheamus, he didn't give a damn what kind of beast Mark Henry was. Sheamus told him that he's got another thing coming if he thinks he's going to get taken out. As for their match at SummerSlam, it was a full-on fight. Henry dominated for the most part, but Sheamus was no slouch. Hell, he even hit the bro kick. They ended up fighting on the outside. Henry bumps into the post before ramming him through the barricade, and is that Eli Drake? Despite all this, Sheamus was still crawling back to the ring, but unfortunately, he was unable to beat the count of 10, meaning Mark Henry was victorious again. Even though he didn't win it outright clean, it still made him look dominant as hell. Sheamus was protected, and great things were in store for one Mark Henry. He was riding high, and Friday night proved to be the start of his main event run. First of all, he described this battle royal as a sea and a ship, and he promised that the 19 others are going overboard, and they're going to sink. About that, well, he was right. Henry dominated, made it to the very end where he manhandled one, seen caught on like that. Randy Orton was put on notice. He was going to defend the title at Night of Champions against the world's strongest man. Before he focused solely on the Viper, Mark Henry absolutely obliterated Sheamus in the main event the following week. The Celtic Warrior did put up a fight, but Henry was on a roll, and never before was he this dominant. You already know. He took out Big Show, Kozlov beat Sheamus from pillar to post, and now he's going to get the chance to finally win the world title. It didn't matter to him if it was Orton or Christian that was the champ. Either way, they lose. After Randy Orton competed in a grueling cage match, probably the best SmackDown match in 2011, debatable I should note, Mark Henry sent a little message to the champ. Again, Orton tried putting up a fight, but the fatigued champ was no match for the number one contender, and with Henry whipping ass, he finally took time out of his busy schedule to discuss this Hall of Pain. It said that people have been thinking that his best years are behind him, so he asked these same people to ask Kane and Big Show about that. He said that his whole career has led to this moment, and he's more aggressive, reckless nowadays, and at Night of Champions, everyone will look at the new world champion. Zack Ryder suddenly interrupted, and Henry straight up told him that he's got a death wish interrupting. The reason why Ryder was out there was because Teddy Long enforced a no-touch rule between Mark Henry and Randy Orton. As he's leaving, Henry orders him back into the ring, and he thanks him for the heads up. But again, he's like, come back into the ring. It's leading to something. This time, he asks Ryder who he thinks is going to win that match at Night of Champions, and he responds with Beth Phoenix. But as for Mark's match, he indicated a possible Orton victory, and in Mark's eyes, that was Zack Ryder's prediction. So he was ready to put his hands on him. Ryder strikes, but Henry delivers a chop that would make Walter proud. Boom, World's Strongest Slam. And then a few minutes later, he destroyed Ezekiel Jackson. On the final SmackDown before Night of Champions, Edge hosted the Cutting Edge with his guests being Randy Orton and Mark Henry. The whole physical contact rule is still there, and Edge thought it was a good thing because Mark has been running through everybody. Basically, Edge was asking Orton, like, do you really think you could beat this man on Sunday? Orton agreed with Edge's sentiments that Mark destroyed the opposition, but reminded everyone that the last time he was attacked, it was after a steel cage match. Orton was trying to get into his head state and stuff like, maybe you think that at your best it's not enough to beat me, and as for the question of, can you beat Mark Henry? Orton doesn't think that, but knows it. Edge agreed that Orton's got a point. Mark Henry's career has been disappointing. He mentioned how in 1998, Mark was a veteran while he was just starting out, and it was odd to Edge that this man wasn't a multi-time champion. He then stated, maybe, and he told him this straight up, Mark Henry lacks a desire. The challenger finally responded to the statement saying, Edge is lucky that he ain't gonna get it because he's right. For 15 years, Mark has seen men smaller and weaker than him become champion. He's seen Orton win the title over and over and over again, and then he mentioned how the upper brass tell him to go out there and smile. Henry was done with that. He was done with showing personality, and he was here to take what Orton's got. 15 years, he's come out and tried to show what he's got, but it wasn't working, and it took him 15 years to get here, and on Sunday, he promised to be world champion. Orton, on the other hand, felt that the match was going to be symbolic of Henry's career. Sure, he may come close, but in the end, he'll be the world's strongest failure, and this is when Edge had to remind them that Teddy Long has that no physical contact rule during the Cutting Edge, and so he announced that the Cutting Edge is officially over, meaning it's on. The entire locker room empty trying to separate those two, but Mark was a force of nature. A little distraction gives way to the world's strongest slam, and Henry stood tall. The ring was cleared. Everyone looked like a jobber, and Henry hit it again before hoisting that title in the air. And Night of Champions, Mark Henry finally did it. During the match, he struggled with keeping Orton down. After that, he was in kayfabe on fire. Orton was on a roll at this point. He was starting to get things together. The crowd, for the most part, was behind him, and at some points, it felt like Henry was going to pull a ton on him. He's going to botch this thing near the end. Luckily, though, for that challenger, Orton was limping, and one of his legs was hurting, and so he tried pulling an RKO out of nowhere. Henry pushes him away. Orton gets up, and boom, World's Strongest Slam. 1, 2, 3. Listen to that crowd. Mark Henry went from being sexual chocolate, an addict, the hand thing, pushed down to developmental, all of that, but he's always remained on the payroll. Just as things get started, he gets injured, but now he's finally got the push that was deserved. It took him 15 years. Stone Cold wrestled for 14 and won the WWF title 6 times. But regardless, Mark Henry finally won the title. After the match, he shouted at the fans to stop cheering, calling them doubters and haters, and then he welcomed the fans to the Hall of Pain. Mark refused to share this moment with the fans because they didn't believe in him, and then he proclaimed himself to be a dominant champion. One thing to know at this point is the fact that Mark Henry was the strongest booked wrestler in the company, in my eyes. This is my opinion. It wasn't CM Punk nor John Cena, it was this guy. And people actually liked him. The ratings started to increase compared to the Orton Christian thing, and he was doing good. It was a good story, he's going through everyone who's gonna stop him. It's some simple stuff, but it was effective. The next night on Raw, Jim Ross, the Doubter, was set to interview the new champion. They had that awesome shot, which would become a regular thing during this title reign. It showed how intimidating and menacing Mark was at this point. JR congratulated him on the victory and asked him about the naysayers. Henry's like, you were one of them, and began talking about his upcoming Hell in a Cell match with Randy Orton. What chants were loud and clear, and damn were they annoying. The title in Mark's eyes was his. He wasn't going to lose it, and regarding the fans, he was still angry at the fact that they never supported him. Matter of fact, he demanded JR apologize on their behalf before apologizing for his mindset himself. Mark mentioned how JR was the same man who told Vince McMahon to cut his costs, and so he flaunted his newly won championship belt. JR apologized, and he's like, I hate ass kissers, before putting his hands on him. Jerry Lawler tried to put a stop to him. He obliged, but it meant Lawler's gonna pay some taxes himself. The strikes he threw ended up angering the champ, and he slammed him. But wait, there's more. Jerry Lawler ended up taking another World's Strongest Slam through the announce table. As a result of the attack, Jerry Lawler was suffering from quote-unquote anal bleeding. Yup, he was suffering from anal bleeding. Booker T couldn't believe it, and Jim Ross had to turn his head away. Also, as a result of the attack, Triple H fined him $250,000. Later that week on SmackDown, Mark Henry made his first appearance on Friday nights as champ. Why am I mentioning this? Well, just wait up. Once again, Henry is like, Teddy Long, you didn't believe me. Sin Cara, you didn't believe me. When all of a sudden, Triple H, the COO, appeared. Just as he's gonna speak, Christian comes in. He made himself seem like the locker room leader, sort of like Seth Rollins nowadays, and Captain Charisma felt Henry was unmarketable. Like, is this guy gonna be in front of a cereal box? Basically, what Christian is trying to say is that for business to be booming, he's gotta be world champion. Triple H responded by giving Christian a lumberjack match, and since he's demanding a title shot after Hell in a Cell, he instead gets the match tonight. About that match, well, again, it showed just how incredibly strong Mark Henry was. So the Lumberjacks tried jumping the champ, right? But it ends up parting both heels and faces alike like the Red Sea, throws Trent into a bunch of them, and Christian, the look on his face was as if they forced him to watch Raw this week or something. He's like, I don't want none, but Sheamus throws him in, where he received a super World's Strongest Slam. Talk about an emphatic victory. All of a sudden, Randy Orton runs in, brings the fight to the new champ, but fails to hit the RKO. But he managed to force him out, though, so there's that. One thing I should mention is the fact that at this point, Randy Orton had yet to RKO Mark Henry. On the final SmackDown before Hell in a Cell, Henry faced the Great Khali. The match didn't really go down on Raw, so the rematch happened on SmackDown. Beforehand, though, Mark Henry was all pissy at Booker T, thinking he's flaunting his 6 title victories. Add to that, he was confused over Booker T, like, you're out here kissing ass, yet at the same time you're dropping insults, what's up? It was increasingly likely that Booker was going to suffer, but Henry luckily was out here for somebody else. As for Randy Orton, he was promising to induct him into the Hall of Pain. Because of all this, Booker had a problem with Mark's thinking. He didn't feel that Henry should focus on hurting talent. And again, he got offended mentioning the last 15 years. It took me this long to win the title, whatever. And then Booker's like, what if Orton hits that RKO? And damn, did Mark get angry. Henry was so self-assured of himself. He was confident. He believed that if Orton could have, he would have hit the RKO. It took him 15 years to develop this mean streak, and just now others are asking him to stop. No. Unfortunately for the Great Khali, he was inducted into the Hall of Pain, and the Red Pants my ass downgraded him from 85 plus to 65 overall. It was essentially a curse. As for Randy Orton, he told Mark that he better pray that an RKO comes his way because it'll be much worse. Of course he claims he's gonna win, yada yada, but after his match with Christian, Henry comes down craving a beatdown. He tries neutralizing him, and again, mission failed. RKO wasn't to be, so SmackDown was gonna end with the same damn picture, Mark Henry standing tall. But he decides to bring in a chair, and as he enters the ring, boom, Orton finally hits that RKO out of nowhere. Mission complete. About their Hell in a Cell match, well, it's often forgotten for good reason. Like during the early 10s, there were so many cell matches that you forgot happened. This match in particular didn't necessitate a cell match, but that can be said for many from the past decade. It wasn't a bad match. I'm not trying to say it was bad, but like the others, it just struggles to stand out. Henry was super resilient during the match, kicking out of the damn RKO, which got Orton downing himself. He goes for the puns, but is unsuccessful, and is caught with a World's Strongest Slam. Another dominant victory. It was clean, which is one thing I like. I love seeing a heel win emphatically. It's different to what we're usually accustomed to, and I just wish it happens more often. It's very rare. After the match, he slams Orton before going for the chair thing to induct him into the Hall of Fame, but the move like WWE 2K21 doesn't happen, and Orton ends up shaming him all the way to the back. And the way Henry ran, it's just straight out of SVR 2011, but yeah. His feud with Randy Orton was officially over. Now he was going to get a visit from a ghost of past. On the October 7, 2011 episode of SmackDown, the Big Show made his return. He spoke about himself being gone for months and how Mark Henry took him out, and the injury gave him so much time to reflect. He thought that he was infallible, and the whole ordeal humbled him. It was like he was gonna cry, and the emotional pain that Henry inflicted on him was haunting the Big Show. But it was also fueling the fire in him. He felt that Henry's momentum was soon gonna come down at his hands, and so essentially, Big Show wanted to take that title away from Mark Henry. Champ comes out with a mic in his hand, tells Big Show that there's been a lot of changes in the last 4 months that he's been out, and he was irritated with Big Show coming in and trying to challenge for a title after a 4-month vacation that he, Mark, afforded him. The only time a Big Show title match will come is when he says so. Big Show responded saying that he's given Mark until the end of the night to give him an answer, translation, his answer or else. At the end of the night, Henry gave his answer, which was no. All of a sudden, Big Show sprints down to the ring, whoops Henry's ass, and the $2 security gets in the way, but it's no match for the Giant. He hits a mean-ass spear, and the champ made a run for it, and his reaction to all this was one of the most hilarious things I've ever seen from 2011 WWE. Big Show chases after him, gets his ass beat for a bit before bouncing back with a chokeslam through the announce table, even did the Stone Cold thing. He wanted to make it 2 for 2, but Teddy Long ran in there and gave in to his demands. Instead of chokeslamming him again, he whacked him with a chair, and it was the first time in a long time that Henry was dominated. Not Randy Orton, nor Sheamus, but the Big Show was the one who whooped his ass. He was going to get his match at Vengeance, but before that could go down, Randy Orton challenged for the gold after winning the biggest, well, was the biggest Battle Royal in WWE history. Cody Rhodes, though, ended up interfering. Big Show runs and gives Mark a beating. Orton hits an RKO, and you can bet that Teddy Long was salivating at the sight of seeing 4 men in the ring. He didn't do it, though. I assume he was busy elsewhere. Before Vengeance, Big Show once again got the best of Mark Henry with a knockout punch. By God, that looked mean. Big Show was the only man that had Henry's number. Nobody got one over him like the Big Show. There was only that one moment where Orton hit the RKO, and that was after weeks of Henry whooping his ass. As to the match at the pay-per-view, it didn't serve to alleviate the heat. It sort of increased it. The match itself wasn't bad. Dare I say it was good. And I felt Big Show had a decent year in ring, but yeah, you'd expect this to suck, but it wasn't even close. It was actually good. Anyways, there was near falls, exciting spots. Take this chokeslam, for example. The super chokeslam, and it should have ended there. Well, Henry was on a roll. After that, Henry proceeded to hit a spot that was a long time coming, which was the ring imploding. It was a great way of keeping both men strong. Neither of the momentum was halted. Big Show was back. Henry was the champion. No one was hurt by this. It also led to the strangely amusing main event between John Cena and Alberto Del Rio. It's just one of the weirdest things you'd watch from 2011 WWE. Later that week, Big Show revealed that a rematch was in the cards, and when Mark Henry heard this, he immediately made his way to the ring. Why? Well, because he had an issue with the word rematch. In his eyes, business was handled last week, and now he's done with the Big Show. Despite this, Henry felt he didn't do a good job of keeping him down, and it was looking like a fight was imminent, but he conveniently felt pain in his leg and decided to walk out. With Big Show contending for the title, WWE decided to make it a little, translation, a lot more interesting. This is my favorite part of the Hall of Pain story. On the November 4th, 2011 episode of SmackDown, Mark Henry felt that a certain somebody was eyeballing him. Who was that man? Well, it was Daniel Bryan. He mentioned the briefcase, to which Bryan said, "I'm cashing in at WrestleMania." Henry, on the contrary, didn't give a damn if he cashed in at WrestleMania or the year after that, and because of this little incident, Henry wanted a match with Mr. Money in the Bank. Big Show took notice of this and told Bryan that it'll be there for him when he cashes in the briefcase. During the match, Henry was dominant. He was the champ, and naturally he's in control, but all of a sudden, Big Show runs in and knocks the hell out of him before trying to wake up Bryan. He's all groggy, briefcase in hand, and by the time Bryan wanted to do it, Mark Henry whooped his ass, and Big Show got it too, when all of a sudden, Teddy Long made an announcement. Big Show gets a rematch at Survivor Series, and when Henry learned of this news, he was raging. Now that Bryan was somewhat involved in the main event, he was a big target to the world champion. Mark Henry comes in, asks him if he thought it was that easy to win the title. Bryan stood his ground and told Mark that he didn't give a damn if it took him 500 years to win the title. If he's the champion at WrestleMania, he'll cash in. Mark responded saying that Bryan's got guts, but it's just a shame that they'll be splattered on the mat later on. Booker T was doing Booker T things and felt that Bryan had the edge because of the honeys. About the match itself, well, Bryan did put up a fight. Valiant effort, but Mark Henry was superb. After the match, Henry felt that it was time to honor Bryan with a spot in the Hall of Pain, but he fought back. Henry quickly took back control. Big Show runs in for the save and Henry's walk-in. And what is that accent?
Beating up on somebody half your size?
Must have switched brains with Braun Strowman or something. Big Show wanted him back in the ring. Henry didn't go, and you guys know how it goes. Right when SmackDown began the following week, Mark Henry slapping Bryan straight, made him look like a jobber. Bryan begins fighting back, but he was flipped inside out, and damn, that looked bad. It was a complete destruction of Mr. Money in the Bank. Henry grabs the mic, promises more of that is coming, and the sentence that stood out to me was this. It was like, one of us is getting carried out on Sunday. It is not going to be me. The Big Show, meanwhile, was Bryan's father, I assume. And because of his attack, he began searching in the bag for the world's strongest man. Jinder Mahal was all tough, and he got KO'd. A couple of minutes later, Big Show's trying to assure himself not to get disqualified because it means no world title. Footage of the Mark Henry thing is shown, and it was to remind him to take away the one thing that Henry values most, the title. As for their match at Survivor Series, it wasn't as memorable as the match as Vengeance for obvious reasons, but hey, Big Show had a damn elbow drop that initiated Randy Savage chant, which was nice to hear. But since Big Show had the momentum, Mark Henry decides to low blow him into oblivion. After the match, though, he was trying to make Big Show a two-time inductee into the Hall of Pain, but it wasn't to be, and again, Mark Henry got knocked out. A Daniel Bryan chant was loud and clear in the arena, but he didn't come out though, and Henry was inducted into his own Hall of Pain. This is what we'd like to call the comeuppance. Despite this, the feud was anything but over. Big Show thought that the low blow was an easy way out, but let him know that there's something waiting for him. You know, the knockout punch. SmackDown rolls around on Friday, and Champ makes his first appearance in Survivor Series. He was limping and was using crutches as a result of the incident from Sunday. He was sad over the fans being happy to see this misfortune, and then all of a sudden made it seem like Big Show was the villain. Oh, I kicked you in the knee, not the private spot. And the reason why he was even here was for his fans, right? You see, this guy, he's a fighting champion. He's an inspiration to all. A champion's got to fight through pain, through injury, and then he's like, I wanted to compete tonight, but Teddy Long and the doctors didn't allow me to. When Big Show once again interrupts, and just thinking about it, he was essentially his kryptonite at this point. The Big Show gave his rebuttal and exposed Mark Henry for deliberately lying. You know, the knee thing. As for the ankle, he did just to Henry what Henry did to him. Big Show's like, next time. And this is when Mark responds, saying that there isn't no next time if we're calling him the world's largest loser. And again, Henry goes down. Michael Cole complains, and all of a sudden, Daniel Bryan's music plays, and he's got a referee. Fans cheer on, the bell rings, and Bryan tries pushing Henry over for the cover. 1, 2, 3, new champion. And man, did Henry have a bad day. Also, I loved how Bryan stood over the announce table to stick it to Michael Cole. And because of this victory, Booker T put Daniel Bryan at the top of his fictional Fave 5. Teddy Long, who was late, made his way to the ring and informed Daniel that Mark wasn't medically cleared to compete. What this meant was the title change did not count, and Mark Henry was still the world heavyweight champion. Michael Cole was really enjoying himself with the announcement, and Bryan was devastated. The fans were booing, and the title was back in Henry's possession, but despite this, the briefcase was back to Daniel Bryan, and Teddy inserted him into a fatal 4-way #1 contenders match, with the winner challenging Mark Henry this Tuesday night for the title. And again, Mark was caught off guard with that announcement. Bryan wasn't really mad with how things went, you know, he had the chance to challenge for the title, and he had the briefcase in his possession. As to the hypocrite, he was whining about defending the title next week and saw this as Teddy trying to pick on him because he's hurt. After that, he revealed that the match next week will be a steel cage. Henry was anything but happy. As for Daniel Bryan, he managed to score the victory in a match with guys in kayfabe who were out of his league. Like, if you were watching SmackDown at this point, Bryan wasn't exactly near Randy Orton, let alone Cody Rhodes. Because Bryan was facing Mark Henry, Michael Cole interviewed him one night before the showdown. He called D. Bryan the biggest hypocrite in WWE history, to which Mr. Money in the Bank responded by calling him the worst announcer in history. He wanted respect from Michael, but he, Cole, refused to do so. Why? Because he lied, you know? Cole felt that the whole incident from Friday was hilarious because Bryan really thought he was the world champion. He responded saying that plans change, and when Henry tried to take him out, he thought to himself, tomorrow isn't guaranteed. After he said that Henry's going to lose tomorrow, the champ interrupted. He told him that he ought to be ashamed of himself coming out and taking advantage of a defenseless man. Himself, obviously. Henry was more angry with Teddy Long for allowing this title match to go down, but it was no biggie because Daniel Bryan couldn't beat him. Because Bryan heard this, he went up to Henry and kicked that injured leg, telling him, we'll see tomorrow night. As for that match, well, I remember enjoying it a long time ago. Match was a damn gem. Daniel Bryan, despite the fact that it wasn't a big deal in WWE, still made everyone believe there was a chance of him winning it. Henry's leg was a bullseye, and Bryan went after him. He locked in the ankle lock, a couple of holds, but unfortunately, even though he had the title in his grasps, Henry dragged him back in from the top of the cage and hit the super world's strongest slam to retain the title. If you're bored, you might enjoy this. Big Show, meanwhile, was getting yet another title shot at TLC, and this time it was a chairs match. He promised to shut down the Hall of Fame, talking about how he was called an underachiever, blah, blah, blah. This led to the champion coming out. He wanted to say something, but was worried over another KO punch. See how things change? So he asked Big Show to promise not to do anything. No was the answer, though. He then downplayed a potential Big Show victory, stating that even if Big Show wins, he beat an injured man, and then Big Show promised not to hit Henry so he could enter the ring. The reason why Mark wanted this was because he wanted to say some stuff face to face, and even wanted to shake the Big Show's hand. He gives in, but before leaving, Henry told Big Show that while he may think he's a monster, he, Mark, knows so. You know, I know I'm a monster, you think that. Sucker punch leads to an attack. After that, Big Show brought in a chair. It spelled disaster for Mark Henry at SmackDown. Damn, just watching these segments again while making this video, Henry probably got one over Big Show twice during this entire Hall of Fame run. Final SmackDown before TLC saw them have a moment. You know, Big Show whooped Jack Swagger's ass while Mark Henry whacked the damn cameraman, sending him flying. As for their match at TLC, well, it only lasted 5 minutes. During the match, Henry walked out refusing to wrestle. Big Show forced him back in with some chair shots. Then he caught the hand. Mark Henry was finally back into when the shots were doing a number to Big Show's fist. And things were looking bleak for him, but he caught Henry with a KO punch out of nowhere to win the World Heavyweight Championship. And thus, the Hall of Pain was closed. Then after the match, Mark Henry attacked the steel chair, even DDT'd him onto the chair, and there he is. Daniel Bryan cashes in, goes for the cover, 1, 2, 3, and Big Show's title reign ended quicker than that Super League stuff. The guy wasn't even at the arena the day of the show, but they managed to bring him in and make him world champion. Big Show, on the other hand, managed to blow it again. He hadn't held the title since 2002 and lost it in about 2 minutes. And so that's the Hall of Pain. Henry would continue competing for a while, but he suffered an injury. You know, he's pretty injury prone at this point. It was enjoyable. The ratings were a reflection of that. He wasn't out here putting out 5-star matches or anything like that, but the storyline itself was very interesting. Henry finally got his chance to become a world champion, and it was definitely one of my favorite title reigns of the 2010s, for sure. Definitely. As for the Daniel Bryan thing, I will eventually do his first title reign, which will transition into the Super Cena Sheamus run. We'll do that, you know, his thing with Alberto Del Rio that was never ending, and the Big Show. So yeah, I got some stuff coming from this time period, you know, CM Punk and John Cena, that feud. A couple of things are coming. What did you guys think of the Hall of Pain? Please comment down below. And that's your first video. Make sure you hit a splash on the like button, and perhaps the world's strongest slam on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.